Hello, and welcome back to That Eurovision site, Eurovision with a Slice of Life. My name is Rosie, I use she, her pronouns, and I am delighted today to be joined by the lovely Rory. How are you doing, Rory?
I'm doing very, very well, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderfully, thank you. As you can see, I have a new haircut. It's currently full of gel. Actually, kind of appropriately, given we're going to be discussing Germany. I was at a fancy dress party last night dressed as the MC from Cabaret. So that is
It
why
was
I am
written in the
somewhat
stars.
defringed right now.
I love it. It's stunning.
So today we are going to be recapping Germany's national final Unser Lied for Liverpool. This took place on the 3rd of March at the MMC Studios in Cologne and was hosted by Barbara Schönberger. We had 9 acts take part, or who were supposed to take part. 8 of them were chosen by the German national broadcaster, with a 9th, Ike Hüftgold, chosen through a TikTok wildcard round. Unfortunately, on the day of the show, Frida Gold had to drop out of the competition due to illness, but we still had 8 lovely performances to enjoy for our viewing pleasure, and ultimately the competition was won by Lord of the Lost with Blood and Glitter. So, Rory, the first thing I would like to ask you is, what were your general thoughts on Germany's national selection process? What did you think of the show overall?
Yeah, so it was definitely when the songs had initially come out, I was a little bit scared because in the last few years, Germany is sort of known for playing it a little bit too safe nowadays. As lovely as Malik Harris was last year, you could easily tell that, it was a song that was destined for radio success, but not so much contest success. And so that was something that I was bearing in mind when the songs came out. But after listening to all the songs that had kind of been internally selected at first, I actually was positively surprised. I guess I had very low expectations, but they were really quite, surpassed, and I was really quite happy about that. So yeah, I had quite a few favorites in there. My favorite one was Frida Gold with Alle Frauen mir sind müde. I thought that was a stunning entry, and I've been a fan of Frida Gold for the past few years. Love Is My Rebellion is like one of my tracks of like 2015 when it came out. Um, so I was so devastated when it didn't come to actually make the selection, like in the end, because Frida Gold's lead singer, ended up falling ill and then missing rehearsals. And, of course, we have to prioritize artists' health here, like again, like as Constructor says, in corpore sano. So we had to make sure that, she was okay. But in terms of the actual selection process, it was actually very good, I thought. And the ability to use TikTok as sort of a streaming platform and also a way to get an extra ticket into the national selection, I thought was a very innovative idea. Only Australia had done that before, and that was last year, wasn't it? Was it Voyager, or there was someone?
It was Pauline, someone, I think. Was that her name, or Paulina?
Paulini?
Paulini, yes, that's the one.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Perfect.
she
Well
was
done.
and
Yeah.
that was chosen by the broadcaster rather than by the public, which Germany's one was.
Right. Okay.
So it
Well,
was a
there you go.
slightly
So
different process, but yeah, a really interesting one.
yeah, and seeing how it's being used as a way to sort of get artists into national selections and sort of capitalizing on that unknown factor that we've seen before. So yeah, so I was quite happy with the show. I thought, the way that it was presented was very strong. It had humor, but it still dealt with things that were very strong and very serious as well. So overall, I think it was a fairly sturdy show, to be honest, put on by ARD NDR. So I was fairly happy with it.
Yeah, I'm pretty much with you on that one. As you've said, Germany has had a little bit of a reputation in the last few years for having not especially interesting national final selections and ultimately then not sending especially interesting songs to Eurovision. And what I did really see this year is that it was a really diverse selection. We really saw some genres in there that we very much don't see a lot of the time when it comes to Germany's selection. We had metal, we had sort of noughties rock in there. We had some folk, more Celtic orientated music in there. We had Trong, who is kind of a V-pop sensation, Vietnamese pop, which again, it's a great little selection actually, and I was really impressed with the diversity of entries in there. I think it's nice as well that NDR were able to sort of choose that range of entries. And then the TikTok thing was a nice thing to have, I think. I have to admit, I am not the biggest fan of Ika Hufgold. And I also think he was actually possibly quite established. I think he had quite a large fan base already. So again, when you're putting those sort of established artists with a pre-existing fan base up against sort of your unknown artists, it's nice to give them a platform, but also it doesn't mean they're necessarily going to have the opportunity to really have that fair shot at the stage. But I think it is a really interesting idea, and I do wonder if this is something that broadcasters might be moving towards, not least with how Eurovision and the EBU themselves are really moving towards TikTok and trying to push TikTok as this sort of partner platform. So who knows whether we'll see something more like that in the future as well. As far as the show goes as well, I actually really enjoyed the show. I thought it was well paced. I enjoyed Barbara well enough. And also I did have to go back before we did this recording and go back and watch that interval medley of Eurovision songs that they did, just so I could see Lonely Spring cover Save Your Kisses for Me again, because that was one of my favorite moments of the entire season. That was just truly delightful in every way, shape, or form. And the other thing as well that utterly delighted me was the entire voting sequence, which was just a beautiful level of chaos and wonder, including everyone's favorite daddy Roop, Vaidotas, having a nice little flirt with Barbara as well, which honestly, valid. Like,
Hey,
yes,
why not?
100%.
Like mother and father figures right there. I mean, for the
Right.
fandom, right there. We love Barbara and Vidotis. Let's make that a thing. Let's make it so that they are together at least by Unser Lied for wherever we're going next year.
And yeah, in terms of the songs, my favorite, and this is going to come as absolutely no surprise to anybody who knows me, was Patty Gurdy. I like Celtic folk music, okay? I'm really sorry. I just heard that hurdy-gurdy and I was sold. And it's absolutely the song that I have kept listening to the most as well ever since the competition. It's still on my playlist. I still really, really enjoy listening to it. And honestly, I like the opportunity for instruments that we don't necessarily get to hear being given that sort of platform as well. And I do feel incredibly sad that her performance probably didn't really go the way she wanted it to. I think it might be an interesting one to think about for the future, because one of the things that you sort of saw during that performance is that a hurdy-gurdy is quite an unwieldy instrument. And it's sort of not so big that you need to like sit down with it like a cello or something, but it's really hard to play while having a bit of like stage presence and movement. And so I think, and I'd love to see her come back in the future, if she does, having a think about how you can incorporate that instrument and the sort of unique sound that that instrument brings, while also having a little bit more freedom and confidence on the stage as well. I also really, really loved Frida Gold as well. And Annika Russo, I'd like to give a bit of a mention to as well. I thought that was Once Upon a Dream was just a really, really beautifully sung ballad. And I'm going to move our discussion onto our winner, which was Lord of the Lost with Blood and Glitter, because I'm actually really quite delighted with this. I love this song. It again has made it onto my playlist. I'm listening to it a lot, with the only downside being that opening line I always hear is blood and glitter, Sweden bitter. And now the song is kind of ruined for me because that's all I hear every time I hear it. But Rory, what do you think of Lord of the Lost song, and how do you think this might do for Germany in Liverpool?
Right. So again, when I first heard the song, I was really kind of surprised that this he had even sort of made it into the selection. I mean, this is not a sound that we hear from Germany at Eurovision. So to hear this even being sort of in the contention to sort of be selected, I was really quite surprised with it. But in a way, I was also not because obviously a lot of sort of hard metal bands have come out from Germany, even that aren't even in the contest. So, for example, like Rammstein, like for me, that's like a big go-to sort of similar artist here. So, I thought they would have a chance, and I'd got going into the contest, like going into the final, I'd heard that this had sort of been released a lot earlier compared to some of the other songs, so it had a bit more momentum going into the competition, and it really worked for them, to be honest. I mean, I'm not a fan of metal and sort of screamo or anything like that. Like that's just something that doesn't really appeal to me as a genre. But there's something in this that kind of draws my attention, and perhaps it's the sort of the slow moments that then contrast with this really like brash in your face style kind of like rock guitar, like it screams at you, but then in these other moments it's really quite quiet and sort of like held and pared back. It offers that kind of nice contrast. And I think as well, this, forgive me if I'm sort of being a little bit sort of like diving down a little bit too deep here, but in those like small parts, do you think that the lead singer sounds a little bit like David Bowie? Because I hear David Bowie in those like blood and glitter, sweet and bitter moments, and it's so unmistakably like that. Maybe towards like the Black Star era, sort of the last couple of albums that he did, but to me, it just was like undeniably him. It was uncanny. Um, and in terms for Eurovision, I mean, already this is already a step in the right direction for Germany. They're taking a risk. This is by far and away maybe some of the most out there music that they've gone for since I want to say even like Elaiza, in 2014. That's like nearly 10 years ago now. And to go from sort of generic radio pop to screamo punk, post-punk rock kind of style. I mean, look, it's a whiplash effect. It's definitely going to be a whiplash, but it means it will be memorable. And that has been Germany's problem in the last couple of years, trying to stand out from the crowd. And with their visuals, I mean, that's definitely going to happen for sure. I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that it will get them out of the bottom five, maybe a mid-table result, but I think for them that will definitely be a step in the right direction. But we'll see how well we get on.
Yeah, I'm absolutely with you on that. I really, really hope this does well for Germany and encourages them to keep sending stuff that is a little bit more risky, that is a little bit more out there, but as you've said, is actually quite reflective of a lot of what is popular from their music scene as well. I think my one concern about them getting a good result, and I'm not going to say that this is necessarily the way that things are going to fall, because things in similar genres can do well, but I do think this has the opportunity to possibly split votes a little bit with Australia. I think that sort of slightly metal rock synthy sound with the sort of blend of the sort of traditional vocals and the slightly screamo vocals, I think that could possibly mean that people are sort of having to choose one or the other. And honestly, I love both of these songs. But I think if you've got a casual viewer on the night who is only going to vote for one song, they're going to have to choose between the two of them. And I'm saying this pretty much in, I think Australia is one of the most certain qualifiers out of semi-final two. So I do think we're going to be seeing them together in the final. But at the same time, I really hope that both of these songs do well. I am just so impressed that Germany are taking a risk. And I think the band have such a huge stage presence. And also quite a lot of established fans. I mean, I was looking at their sort of history and the things they've done before, and I have a lot of friends in the goth scene, and they recognize their name. Like my goth scene friends in the UK know who Lord of the Lost are. They play at a big festival called Mera Luna, and I have a friend who runs something called Goths on a Bus, where they get a load of goths and they travel from like the UK to Germany to go to Mera Luna every year. And it's brilliant. And yeah, like they're a well-known name, a really established name as well. So I'm really hoping as well that that sort of established power can hopefully get Germany a good result. I am so desperately hoping that this is a year where we see a really strong result for everybody who is an automatic qualifier, because I think every single one of them have sent great songs. And I just want that to pay off. I know as a very sad and bitter Fulen stan from last year, I know that taking a risk doesn't necessarily always pay off, even though I think it is exactly what I think so many of these countries should be doing. And I really, really hope that Germany doesn't fall victim to that this year. But I think these guys, they know how to put on a show. They've got such great stage presence. We know they can sing live. We know that it's going to stand out. And I just hope that the audience connects to it. I think we really do have a little bit, especially in semi two, but then moving on to the final as well, we really do have a bit of a battle of the bands this year. And so I really hope that they're able to stand out in that, because it would be such a shame for them to continue a string of bad results, not out of not sending quality, but just out of getting lost in a vaguely similar field of sort of bands that go anywhere between sort of softcore indie all the way to sort of metal and screamo. I would love them to all do really, really well.
Definitely. And I think as well, you are right in saying that like Australia and Germany are kind of the most similar in terms of their sort of sonic sort of genre. So definitely like when it would come down to running order, obviously, we're recording this in March. This isn't, we don't know when running orders are coming out, let alone in the grand final. And I think though, if Australia was to qualify, because again, we don't know yet, things could change on the night. The organizers would have to make sure that it gave Germany enough space to really shine like that, because again, this is something that we've never seen from, well, it's not never seen from Germany, but like, it's something that has rarely been seen from Germany. And it's showing that, they are the automatic qualifiers that haven't been getting the good results now. France and Italy came, top two in 2021. Spain and the UK came second and third in 2022. Germany is starting to fall behind, and it needs to be able to throw its weight basically behind staging, behind great presence, and also good promotion, I think, as well. Again, it's great that, Lord of the Lost is sort of known amongst like wider audiences. They should capitalize on that. They should get out, do some PR, and let them speak their minds, because, I mean, in the small little glimpses of their social media that I've seen, they're very positive towards the contest. They're very open. They're very tolerant people. Like, let the masses hear that. And then that will translate into votes, because it's happening for other artists at the moment, like Keria, Loreen, Taya and Selena. Like, these are names that are being thrown around. And Lord of the Lost, but they don't want to be the Lords of the Lost, So, it's making that impact that they need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So, just to wrap things up, do you have any final thoughts that you would like to add on Unser Lied? Is there anything that you think they should maybe change if they redo the national final next year, off the top of your head?
Yeah, it's a hard one, to be fair, because they had a very slick national selection sort of process already. Like, it seemed like it was fairly well thought out. were it not for the whole Frida Gold having to withdraw at the last moment thing, because then it kind of caused a little bit of a chaotic moment so that um, even though Frida Gold weren't taking part, they were still using the 08 in the draw. So then, of course, that would have disadvantaged the or confused the audience for the person if they wanted to perform, if they wanted to vote for the people who performed last, which just so happened to be Lord of the Lost, which is fine, obviously, because they won the whole thing. But I think if it was to maybe be done again next year, maybe just sort of changing that kind of little technical aspect, no one's really going to know how to vote for 09 when 08 isn't there. People will think, oh, where's 08? And I know they did go on quite a lot of the time during the selection about sort of that kind of technical aspect of it. So, but still, it's just something that maybe would be worth sort of investigating a little bit more. In terms of the actual sort of songs that were selected, keep up with this diversity. I think, that's always been a criticism of Germany, is that they just play things too safely. And even if this doesn't get a top 10 result, or even even if it just gets them out of the bottom five, that will be a positive step in the right direction. So they need to build on that a little bit stronger and make sure then that people won't be discouraged from applying, because as we've seen through the TikTok selection, I mean, it had how many hundreds of people applying to try and do it. Like, there is desire to represent your country. I do think, actually, I would echo your points on having Ike go through the TikTok thing. I mean, he was, again, like how you said, he was a very well established artist, and Patty Gurdy was supposed to have been trying to get a ticket into the selection through the wildcard element, because she was doing a lot of heavy promo on TikTok. And then it just so happened that they kind of switched. So she kind of got invited through AERD, and then Ika had to go through the national, like through the TikTok selection. That was a little bit weird. So yeah, so I would say definitely sort of change that little bit of selection so that like no new big artists can kind of get in through TikTok, because otherwise, obviously, you can't change how people react to trends. For example, like that, it just so happens we're all at mercy to the bots and the algorithm, etc. So if we're having, just to balance it out, have just solely new and upcoming acts, I think that would be a great platform, to boost their profile, and then also show the transparency as well in ARD, and make sure that they know that they're taking chances on artists that could end up having fantastic careers. I mean, like Lena was not known at all before she won her selection, and now look at her, she's one of the biggest artists in Germany. So yeah, just sort of little fine tweaks here and there, but overall I think I was fairly happy with the organization. How about you?
Yeah, I think my main thing I wanted to say was pretty much what you've already said in terms of the TikTok selection, in terms of at least kind of trying to level the playing field in terms of the artists that are coming up through there. I think, like you've said, it's a really interesting way of allowing artists that don't necessarily have that established fan base in the same way that some of the larger artists do, to be given a place on that platform and a chance to show their work. And I think that being used for artists that already are very established, I think makes it much harder, not least because I think there were better songs and better artists in that TikTok selection. So me and the German public aren't going to agree on everything. But yeah, I think just making sure that that playing field is a lot more sort of standardized and fair. I don't quite know how you'd be able to do that. Like, hopefully setting some sort of criteria amongst who would be allowed to go through a TikTok wildcard stage versus who, or being able to, I don't know, like do something with the votes. I don't quite know how it would work, like statistically or mathematically, but I think there should be some way of just ensuring that people aren't going into a TikTok wildcard with no chance of winning, regardless of what they're sending, because somebody else against them already has millions and millions of fans who are already ready to press a button and vote for them.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as well, I mean, looking back on like Germany's last couple of like times where they have had a wild card, a lot of the time the wild card has actually gone to Eurovision. For example, Elisa in 2014, they managed to get in through like the sort of sub show that kind of then went into was it Unser Lied for Unser Song for Denmark, I think it was, yeah. And then obviously in 2015 as well. I mean, of course, that was only a technicality because Andreas Kummer decided to withdraw after winning. So, there was a whole debacle about that. But anyway, to get down to brass tacks, I mean, it was another wild card that managed to, at least make it to the top two and then go to Eurovision by proxy because of this whole thing. So Germany does have a bit of a tendency to go for a wild card. So at least make sure that the entry to the wild card, like for the wild card, is actually as representative as possible, if you can, of like what German public is, instead of just relying heavily on young people, because obviously, that isn't necessarily representative. And I'm not a big Sweden fan. I mean, that's very well known on this site, but at least on there they have age groups that that give people an opportunity to voice their opinion. And that we've seen that in Melfest, maybe there should be something like that sort of taken into account for TikTok, maybe.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for joining me, Rory. That is our discussion on Unser Lied for Liverpool, and we will see how Lord of the Lost does in Liverpool in a few months' time. Should we say bye?
Yes, let's do. Bye.
Bye.